Faces appearing on a Spanish kitchen floor. A Redditor takes a picture of 3 dogs, except they only have 2, and glowing balls of light over Washington, D.C., zipping faster than jets, hovering over the White House, disappearing when fighter planes went to investigate. These are disturbing photos that suggest we're living in a simulation. What you're looking at here is a photo of one of the Belmez faces. What are the Belmez faces, you ask? The story begins in 1971 in a little Spanish town called Belmez. A woman named Maria Gomez Camara looks down at her kitchen floor and swears that she sees a human face forming in the concrete. Not like a stain or a crack that kind of resembles something, an actual detailed face. Her husband and son freaked out, smashed the thing with a pickaxe, poured new concrete, but within days, another face appeared. Word spread, and the mayor himself told the family not to destroy this new one. Instead, chunks of the floor were cut out and taken away to be studied. Meanwhile, people started flocking to this house, which became known as the House of the Faces. And the faces didn't stop. Over the years, new ones popped up. Men and women, young and old. Some even seemed to change slightly over time, like they were alive in the concrete. Paranormal investigators floated the idea that it was thoughtography. Basically that Maria's house or her subconscious was somehow imprinting these faces from the spirit world onto the floor. Skeptics have tested samples and come back with theories about paint or chemicals, but in 2014, a forensic team tried to recreate the phenomenon, but they couldn't pull it off. Their conclusion? Inconclusive. To this day, these faces are still a mystery. This image was shared by Reddit user OKTwist3079. Doesn't look to be anything odd in this image at first glance. We got 3 cute dogs in Christmas outfits playing in the snow, but the Redditor only has 2 dogs. OKTwist writes, "I took this photo of my 2 dogs. So please explain how there are 3 dogs in the photo. No one was visiting and I have no idea how to use Photoshop. My mother-in-law is freaking out and I have no explanation." The fact that they're all wearing the same outfit and all in different positions, I'm just losing it. How? Now, obviously, this isn't double exposure. This was snapped on an Android phone. I'm no expert on camera glitches, but doesn't really look like one to me. Doesn't seem to be any interference in the image. Again, if you didn't have the context, you'd think this was a totally normal photo. Any ideas, folks? Genuine curiosity or hoax? Share your thoughts down below. What you're looking at here is photographic evidence of one of the most mysterious and well-documented UFO events in history. It started on the night of July 19th, 1952. Air traffic controllers at Washington National Airport picked up 7 unidentified objects on radar. Controllers said the blips looked solid, like actual aircraft. At the same time, pilots in the air were reporting strange lights moving above them. One pilot described them as glowing balls that shot across the sky faster than any jet could follow. Then radar at Andrews Air Force Base, just outside DC, confirmed the exact same objects. One point, controllers said the UFOs were hovering over the White House and Capitol building. Fighter jets were scrambled, but whenever they got close, the objects just vanished. As soon as the jets left, the UFOs came back. That little cat and mouse game happened over and over. Not just that night, but again a week later on July 26th. The press went wild. Headlines in major papers screamed, "Saucers swarm over Capitol." It got so insane that President Truman personally asked for a briefing. The Air Force didn't really have an explanation, but they just said, well, it's temperature inversion. Basically a rare weather condition that can cause issues for radar, but that of course doesn't explain the pilots who saw lights with their own eyes. Well, this car's clearly totaled. Whoever was in that car must have been pancaked to death, right? Wrong. On a November evening in 1988, Rose Benvenuto swerved to avoid hitting a stray dog in upstate New York, resulting in this brutal crash. Most people would have been killed, but somehow, remarkably, Rose walked away with barely a scratch. That's when things got even stranger, because a firefighter named Sharon Boo took pictures of the wrecked car, and in one of her shots, the one we're looking at again here, there's clearly this glowing, transparent figure hovering by the vehicle. The figure is ghost-like, you can see through it, but it's clearly there in the image. And the figure showed up not only in that print, but also on the negative, so it wasn't a development trick or double exposure. Both Rose and Sharon went on to label the figure a guardian angel, maybe the very being that saved Rose's life. Don't film TikTok dances alone in dingy underground parking lots. You might have a shadow person morph out from the concrete and lurk behind your back. That's what happened to this girl. You gotta look really closely, but something does seem to appear right behind her, a dark, shadowy figure. Not ominous at all. Who or what is it? Where did it come from? What does it want? I can't say. I just hope this girl wasn't engulfed by some nefarious dark force and dragged down to the depths of the shadow realm for eternity. If anyone knows if this person's done videos since, give us like a proof of life update in the comments. So this clip aired on CNN in early July 2009, just a couple weeks after Michael Jackson died. They were doing a segment from inside Neverland Ranch, walking through the house with a reporter giving commentary. After the segment aired though, a good number of people flocked to the internet claiming that they'd seen something odd in the footage. So in the background there was this dark, human-shaped figure moving across the far end of the hallway. At first glance it looks like a shadow, but there are a few things that made people take a second look. First, no one is visible walking around in that area at the time, and there's no crew member seen entering or exiting. That hallway is in full view and nothing else in the frame really explains the movement. And then when people started slowing it down and enhancing the footage, it got weirder. The shadow has a kind of upright human posture. It's not just a flicker of light, and you'll notice the shadow seems to cast its own faint shadow on the floor as it moves across. And then there's the shape itself. Some viewers pointed out the figure kind of matches that classic MJ silhouette, that tilted head, the gliding motion he was known for. Pretty weird stuff. Now, don't you just hate it when the book you're holding morphs into a completely different color? I mean, it just makes life so much more confusing than it needs to be. Watch this. How did his book immediately change color like that? First thought is that he might have had more than one book and then switched them as he was walking behind the car, but that's not what it looks like at all. I don't see any shifting going on. His arms never change position. He's just walking in this smooth straight line, but then abruptly book goes from red to green. People posted all kinds of theories, but one dude on Reddit had a pretty interesting answer. User Yodan wrote, "I work graphics for the news. This is 110% some producer for the spot asking for that color change. It's super fast to key the color into another one, but I agree it's a dumb change. Better to have infographics or typography hammer home the point. Someone wanted to make something they thought was cool or cute and told like 2 or 3 other people down the line, just do it if they got pushback. Some days, I just think of reworks at 20 minutes to air. Make the green a blue. Why? Okay, now make the blue a green. Okay." So, yeah, really odd. I did not know changing the color of objects on the news was something they would ever bother with. And also, why didn't they switch the color of the book to green for the entire clip? Why does it go from red to green later on? I don't know. Weird. What would you do if you saw the sky glitch? You make a video about it, of course. TikToker Danny Amos Jr. happened to catch something very weird on camera. He'd been out turkey hunting when he decided to get a nice shot of the sky. The sun was rising. It looked really pretty. As he was panning across the sky though, something weird happened. Take a look at this. Did you see that weird flash in that one patch of the sky? Pretty bizarre. Now, it'd be easy to chalk this up to a glitch in the camera itself, but take a listen to what he says here.
I wasn't looking through the phone. Like, I was scanning the field, but I was like looking at the field, and I seen the sky do it.
Some people find cats really creepy, and if you're one of those people, this video won't make that aspect of your life any easier for you. I don't know much about this video other than it was filmed somewhere in China. It's pretty amazing. I mean, how eerily still this cat is. This is a pretty long clip, and it does not move. Its tail looks like it flutters in the wind a bit, maybe. People passing by also thought this was strange. They all stopped to stare and pull out their phones to document it. At first, I thought someone placed their taxidermied house cat on the street as a joke. I mean, why else would you stuff your dead pet? But then another cat sidles up and freezes as well. What the hell? Is there some kind of an animal maybe that they're trying to ambush? Cats will go still when they're hunting something, but for this long? And apparently some folks who were there said there were no objects on this section of the street that would have attracted the attention of the animals. So I don't know. Glitch in the Matrix, or is this just a case of cats being cats, i.e. being weird? Notice anything strange about this image? This photo was shared on Reddit by Veruca Moon. You'll notice that one of the cars ahead has a license plate that says Peekaboo. Pretty cute. Until your eyes catch a car right next to it that says, I see you. Just a quirky coincidence, or is this the universe's subtle way of saying someone's always watching you? That's a creepy thought. If you're thinking the two cars might have been driving together as a joke, well, no. Veruca Moon said that they split off in different directions at the next intersection. Disneyland, the most magical place on earth, they say. I've never been, but I think I might need to check it out now, because apparently if you're lucky enough, at just the right moment, you may have a big bearded man in a red shirt teleport out of nowhere right in front of you. Take a look for yourself. Wow. It's breathtaking. I can almost feel the spirit of my long-buried childhood dreams rising up through my ever-decaying body as we speak. You know what? Maybe, just maybe, magic really does exist. Who is the bearded, red-shirt man? Is he from some other place in time? The ghost of a long-forgotten, starry-eyed park guest? A father forever doomed to stroll the park in search of a family that has long since moved on after his untimely passing? Or is he just a man like you and me? If you are a man, that is. A person, how about? Is he just a person like you and me who done got glitched? We may never know, and that's the real magic, my friends. In the early 2000s, we have The Lord of the Rings, but in 2025, TikTok proudly presents yet another epic saga involving finger jewelry. Ladies and gentlemen, buys and tries, this is the beloved classic tale finally brought to the computer screen, The Glitch of the Rings. So this lady was about to head out of the house for a dental appointment. She takes off her rings and goes to put them in her jewelry box. The last thing you ever want to do is show up at the dentist with a ring on your finger. Well, when she opens her jewelry box, she notices that there is suddenly a third copy of one of her rings. Where, oh where, did that third copy of the ring come from? Did two realities cross over, causing a glitch? Is there a parallel universe running right next to this one where this same lady is making a TikTok video being like, one of my rings is missing? Probably, yes. I can't think of another explanation, so that means there isn't one. So this happened during a live TV interview at a Copenhagen airport. A guy is being interviewed for a Danish sports center, and in the background, there's a lot going on. Like most airports, there are people grabbing their bags, chatting, usual airport stuff. But keep your eye on the woman with the blonde hair. Now, at one point, right in front of her, you see a woman with a luggage cart. The woman with the luggage passes by the blonde woman just for a brief, very brief moment, and then this happens. The woman just vanishes. Where'd she go? She's there 1 second, and then she's gone right in the middle of the shot. There's no obvious edit. It's not a camera cut. Naturally, people online started losing their minds, trying to figure out how that even happened. It's probably just a weird perspective thing, but still, it's a very bizarre watch. I just hope that woman isn't somewhere in the Twilight Zone or something. Now, what exactly happened here? This dude throws a flip-flop into the air, which just vanishes out of thin air on its way back down. Already insane, but then the guys are looking up at this small glowing light in the sky. Take a look at this. It's just hovering there in place right over their heads, and then it zips away. I don't know how to describe what I just watched. Addressing the flip-flop part first though, I read one commenter saying that it just fell onto or behind the roof in the background, which no. Watch it again. That is not what that looks like at all. The flip-flop is thrown directly overhead and the roof is behind them. Plus, it vanishes while still in the air. It doesn't look like something falling behind another object. Some people are saying the weird orb thing is a bird. If so, why is it just hovering in place like that? Also, it doesn't look or move like a bird at all. At least not a bird I've ever seen. Small drone, maybe, but a bird, I don't think so. The internet. If it didn't exist, we'd never get to witness inexplicable stuff like this unless it showed up on America's Funniest Home Videos. or something.
In 2008, a woman named Lorena Garcia from Spain woke up and immediately felt something was off. At first, it was little things. Her bed sheets were different, her pajamas weren't the ones she remembered putting on the night before. Confused, she chalked it up to grogginess and just got ready for work. But when she got to the office, the weirdness escalated. She'd been working at the same place for 20 years, but when she arrived, she realized she didn't work in the same department anymore. She was listed under a completely different role, one she swore she'd never been assigned. Her boss, her coworkers, the whole structure was different, but it got worse. She reached out to her ex-boyfriend, who she'd broken up with months earlier, only to find out that they'd never broken up at all. According to him, they were still together. The man she had been dating, who she'd just seen a few days ago, was nowhere to be found. His number didn't even work. It was like he never existed. Lorena genuinely believed she'd woken up in a different version of reality, one nearly identical to her own but with very key differences. She went to doctors, psychologists, everyone she could think of trying to explain what happened, but no one had an answer. She was healthy, her memory was sharp, yet her life didn't match her memories. And to this day, Lorena insists that she's from somewhere else, that she somehow crossed into a parallel dimension and has been stuck here ever since. In May of 1972, 4 girls from Southern Utah University were driving home after a rodeo when they took a shortcut through Gadianton Canyon, near the Utah-Nevada border. Around 10 p.m., the road beneath them changed from black asphalt to smooth white cement. The desert landscape gave way to unfamiliar grain fields and towering pines, not at all what they expected in southern Utah. Thinking they were lost, they turned around. Then they spotted a small roadside tavern and pulled over to ask for directions. Before anyone could get out, one of the girls screamed. Heading towards them were 4 strange egg-shaped vehicles with tricycle-style wheels and glowing lights. The girls, completely panicked, jumped back in the car and tore off through the canyon. As suddenly as it started, the strange scenery disappeared and the road returned to normal. They eventually crashed into a creek, damaging her car and flattening 3 tires. At dawn, they hiked to the highway and flagged down a trooper named Victoria Lindquist, who was shocked and confused to find that their tire tracks ended abruptly 600 feet into the desert. And despite being found miles from the road, no one could explain how they got there. One hubcap was also missing, which was never found. Back in the 1800s, there was a man named William Cantello, an eccentric British inventor obsessed with creating a rapid-fire automatic weapon. After years of work, he told his family he was heading to the market to sell his invention, and he never came back home. Roughly 20 years later, an American inventor named Hiram Maxim rose to fame with, you guessed it, a rapid-fire automatic firearm. Maxim also looked strikingly similar to Cantello, so much so that Cantello's own children were convinced he was their father. The resemblance became such a nuisance that Maxim addressed it in his autobiography, claiming someone had been impersonating him. Now, that may have been the case. It was just a coincidence that he not only looked just like another man, but also took up the same vocation. But some believe Cantello faked his disappearance and took on a new identity, or that Cantello and Maxim were the same person from 2 different realities, and at some point they switched places, leaving both men stuck in the wrong timeline. This has to be one of the strangest missing persons cases that I have ever heard. In 1763, in a quiet English town of Shepton Mallet, a man named Owen Parfitt vanished without a trace. He was old, frail, and paralyzed. He couldn't walk, couldn't dress himself, he barely moved. Locals say he was a former sailor with a shady past, but by the time this story takes place, he was basically bedridden. Well, one warm evening, Owen was sitting outside his sister's cottage, propped in a chair, enjoying the breeze. His sister and a neighbor helped him outside, then they went inside for a bit. They claimed they were gone maybe 15 minutes, and when they came back, the chair was there, still facing the road, but Owen was gone. Now, this wasn't a busy area. It wasn't like someone could sneak up, lift a full-grown man who couldn't walk, and then vanish without making a sound, but it seemed like that's exactly what happened. People searched the fields, wells, nearby roads. Nothing. Days passed, then weeks. Rumors spread. Some started to wonder if he'd just been faking the paralysis for years before finally deciding to... what? wander off into the wilderness alone? I don't know. It's not a good option. The theories? I don't know. I've got no new ones. In 1961, a girl named Terry Jo Duperalt went on what was supposed to be a dream family vacation, a week-long cruise on a rented sailboat in the Bahamas. But just a few days in, everything went horribly wrong. Terry Jo woke up one night to the sound of footsteps and her brother screaming. When she went topside, she found the deck covered in blood. Her mother and brother were dead. The captain, Julian Harvey, was the only adult left standing, and when he saw her, he didn't say a word. He just stared. She went back below deck, terrified. Minutes later, water started flooding in. The boat was sinking. She escaped onto a small floaty and drifted alone for nearly 4 days under the scorching sun. Dehydrated, sunburned, and half-conscious, she was eventually rescued by a Greek freighter. The fact that she survived at all was almost a miracle. Captain Harvey was rescued days earlier in a lifeboat and told authorities that the boat sank in a freak accident. He said that everyone else was lost at sea, but when he found out Terry Jo survived, he took his own life immediately. She never saw him kill her family, but everyone believes that that is exactly what happened, probably for insurance money. Still, there are holes in the story, and what Terry Jo saw that night, she never fully talked about. Some say she blocked it all out, others think something even darker went down. Till this day, though, the case has never really been solved. There is a book about this, if you're interested. I think it's called like Orphan Lost at Sea or something like that. And also, if you're a fan of the podcast MFM, if you know, you know, in one of their recap episodes that they're doing right now, the rewinds, they just did this one like a few weeks ago, so go listen to that, read the book. The story's crazy, you guys. That's just crazy. This little girl's just lost at sea, then she's found, and everything was okay for her. Then that's the important part of the story. Now, this first case is very, very strange. In 1880, a farmer named David Lang reportedly vanished into thin air while walking across a field on his property near Gallatin, Tennessee. There were multiple witnesses, including his wife, his 2 children, and 2 visitors arriving in a horse-drawn buggy. They said Lang was mid-step when he literally just disappeared. There was no flash of light, he hadn't fallen or gone behind a tree, he was there 1 second, and then he wasn't. The group ran to where he'd been standing, expecting to find a sinkhole or some kind of trap in the ground, but the earth was solid. They searched the area for days. Neighbors joined in, but no sign of Lang was ever found. The only thing that changed was the grass where he had vanished. It turned sort of like it decayed. It turned yellow and brittle, and for years afterward, nothing would grow there. Then, months later, Lang returned. Sort of. His daughter was playing in a field looking for 4-leafed clovers, and that's when she heard it. A voice that sounded a lot like her father, calling for help. It was faint, like it was coming from underground or from behind a wall. It happened more than once, but each time they checked, there was still nothing. Eventually, even the voice stopped. The story was pretty well known at the time. It showed up in the newspaper, and the names, place, and details were consistent with public records. Was it fabricated? Maybe, but everyone there that day remained adamant about what they saw. In 2006, Carol Chase McKelney was driving through Riverside County, California, on her way home from a dog show. As she passed through her old hometown of Riverside, she figured she'd take a quick detour to see the neighborhood she grew up in. It had been years since she visited, and she was curious to see how much it had changed. Except, it wasn't her town. The street names were right, the general layout looked familiar, but her childhood home was completely gone, and so were all of the houses around it. The neighborhood had totally changed, like it had been wiped out and replaced with strange, unfamiliar buildings. She went to look for her grandmother's house. Gone too. Her old school was nowhere to be found. Even the cemetery where several family members were buried didn't look the same. The graves were different, and the whole place just felt wrong, like a dream version of her hometown. Completely shook, she got out of there, and it wasn't until years later that she felt the courage to come back. But this time, everything was normal. Her grandmother's house was there, her childhood home too, the school, everything was just like it always had been. So, what happened? Carol was completely sober, not tired, not on medication. She knew what she saw and what she didn't see. She swore up and down that for a few strange hours, she stepped into some alternate version of her hometown, a place almost like hers, but not quite. In 1978, 23-year-old Stephen Kubacki was a college student studying German at Hope College in Michigan. One February afternoon, he went cross-country skiing near Lake Michigan and never came back. The next day, his skis and backpack were found near the edge of the frozen lake. There were footprints leading out onto the ice, and then nothing. Search and rescue teams looked for weeks, but no trace of him was ever found. Everyone assumed the same thing, that he had fallen through the ice and died. Except, 15 months later, he showed up. Stephen woke up on a grassy hill in a field in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, over 700 miles away from where he disappeared. He was wearing clothes he didn't recognize, with a satchel full of maps he didn't remember collecting. He had a t-shirt from a marathon in Wisconsin, which he didn't recall running, and his last memory was being on the ice. He walked to his aunt's house nearby, and from there eventually reconnected with his parents. Nobody had seen or heard from him in a year and 3 months, but all things considered, he looked healthy. He was just confused like everybody else. When asked what happened, Stephen said he had no idea. He didn't remember anything. It was like someone had hit a reset button on his brain. To this day, he still doesn't talk much about it, and after the incident, he went back to school, earned a degree, and eventually became a clinical psychologist, which is kind of wild considering he's got one of the strangest unsolved disappearance stories on record. But I guess also maybe that makes him the perfect person for the job, you know? In March of 2017, Bruno Borges, a 24-year-old psychology student from Brazil, vanished without a trace. His family had last seen him at their home in Rio Branco, and when they realized he hadn't taken his phone, wallet, or anything useful for a getaway, they went into his locked bedroom. And that is when things got really strange. The entire room had been turned into some kind of cryptic research lab. The furniture was gone, replaced with a giant statue of a 16th century philosopher who believed in infinite worlds and extraterrestrials. There were also pages and pages of handwritten text covering the walls, floor to ceiling. Over 14 books worth written in a bizarre code nobody could read. Bruno's family had no idea any of this was going on. He'd apparently been working on it in secret for months. When news about his disappearance came out, internet sleuths obsessed over his case. His encrypted writings were eventually partially decoded. They talked about personal evolution, contact with higher beings, and preparing humanity for something bigger. But still, no one knew where he went. But after 5 months of silence, Bruno showed up back home, barefoot. He wouldn't say much about where he'd been, only that he'd been working on his ideas. His family and police said he was in good health, mentally stable, and not on any substances. He didn't really give interviews, and most of the public still doesn't know why he left or what exactly he was trying to do. In 1935, British Royal Air Force officer Victor Goddard was flying a biplane over an abandoned airfield near Edinburgh, Scotland. I think that's how you say it, and everyone in the comments is gonna be like, that's not how you say it. Well, I'm not Scottish, so I don't know what you want me to do. The place was falling apart, overgrown with weeds, buildings crumbling, not a soul in sight. A few days later, he flew the same route again, but this time, something was off. As he approached the airfield, a sudden storm hit. Thick, swirling clouds, heavy rain, turbulence. Then, just as fast, the sky cleared. Everything looked brighter. Unnaturally so. The airfield below was no longer abandoned. The buildings were intact, freshly painted. Planes were on the ground, yellow ones, which wasn't the standard RAF color at the time, and mechanics in blue overalls were moving around, working on them. None of this made sense in 1935. The colors, the uniforms, the specific model of aircraft he saw, they weren't part of the Air Force yet. When he told people what he'd seen, they thought he was just confused or mistaken. But a few years later, during World War II, that same airfield was brought back to life. It was restored, the planes were painted yellow, and the mechanics wore blue coveralls, just like Goddard had described. It was as if he had seen the future. No one could explain it then, and no one really can now, and Goddard wasn't some nut. He was an air marshal. Dead serious, no nonsense, and he swore up and down till his death that this actually happened.
6 years ago, Reddit user Peony Bino shared a pretty unsettling experience. She was driving to work, stopped in a left turn lane when a car pulled up behind her. Out of nowhere, this intense cold fear hit her. It was like she just knew the car was going to crash into them. The car behind stopped gently a few yards back, but the fear didn't go away. Then things got even weirder. She felt this sudden jolt through her body, so strong it felt like the car actually moved with her. Checking the rear mirror, the other car was still there. The light turned green, and just before she took her foot off the brake, an excruciating pain exploded in her neck and head. She also noticed a strong smell and a taste of gasoline. It was overwhelming. She slowly rolled down the window, moved through the intersection, and gave an apologetic wave to the driver behind her. Pino Bino pulled into the office parking lot, trembling. The pain and gasoline smell eventually went away, but she was still shaken for the rest of the day. She even felt afraid to get back into the car at the end of the day. She called her fiancé, who joked, "Maybe you died in a car accident in an alternate universe and you felt it." Pino Bino just laughed that off at the time, but says she hasn't been able to shake that idea since. Years ago, a now deleted Reddit user shared a haunting story in an Ask Reddit thread about feeling a deep connection to someone they met in a dream. He explained that during his last semester at college, he was tackled by a massive football player, 325 pounds compared to his 120. He was unconscious for a little bit, but ended up being okay. He met an amazing woman, and after months of chasing her and dealing with a few jerk boyfriends, they ended up getting married. Soon after, they had a daughter. He had a good job, his wife stayed home to take care of the kid, and when their daughter was 2, they had a son. Life was almost picture perfect, but one day, while sitting on the couch, he noticed something off about a lamp in his room. Its perspective was inverted, like it was 3D, but just wrong. He couldn't look away, staying up all night staring at it. The next morning, he didn't go to work. Over the next few days, he stopped eating and barely left the couch, completely fixated on this lamp. His wife started getting worried, called someone to talk to him, but he knew something was really wrong here. It was like his mind was unraveling. Eventually, he had an epiphany. That lamp wasn't real. Neither was his house, the wife, the kids, or the last 10 years of his life. That's when the lamp grew bigger in his vision, turning everything red while he heard screams and felt intense pain. And he suddenly woke up, lying on the sidewalk, surrounded by strangers. He was still on the ground, just having come back too from being tackled by the football player. In the brief time he'd been unconscious, he'd imagined an entire life. But it felt very real to him, too real. In his own words, "I went through about 3 years of horrid depression. I was grieving the loss of my wife and children, dealing with the knowledge that they never existed. I was scared that I was going insane, as I would cry myself to sleep, hoping I would see her in my dreams. I never have, but sometimes I see my son, usually just a glimpse out of my peripheral vision. He's perpetually 5 years old, and I can never hear what he says." This next story comes from Gunzo, who said he once dreamed he was driving home, listening to old music, when he spotted a badly damaged car on the side of the road. He stops, calls for help, and finds an unconscious young woman with short curly blonde hair inside. Drags her out, gives her first aid, until an ambulance arrives. When he glanced back at the woman though, she was suddenly wide awake and shocked, and that's when he woke up. Well, weeks go by, and his uncle gives him a family photo collage for his birthday. Among the pictures was his mom, young, pregnant at the time. She was also covered in scars. In fact, she looked exactly like the woman from his dream. When he told his dad about this, his dad said, well, a man rescued his mom after a car accident 25 years earlier, and then mysteriously vanished. Redditor this_IUS shared a strange story about his friend Gavin, who he said was incredibly smart, like higher IQ than anyone he knew. This happened when they were teens. One day, the Reddit user made an impromptu stop at Gavin's place. He knocked on the door and was shocked when a middle-aged man answered. It was not Gavin's dad. And things only got stranger. When he asked if Gavin was home, the man said, "I am Gavin." The man looked very confused. After some back and forth, the man was like, "Okay, yeah, he'll be back later." He seemed to just wanted to be left alone. Well, later, when the Redditor told Gavin about this, Gavin insisted no one else had been there, and he'd been home the whole time, too. This led to a theory. Had that middle-aged man actually been Gavin, a future version of him that had somehow, briefly, slipped back in time? A TikToker named Kilmaru started uploading videos over 2 years ago, with his first video captioned, "I am very scared." In it, he's filming from his hotel window, looking out at a city street in broad daylight, and there's no one there. Then he walks outside. Restaurants, supermarkets, even a McDonald's, all stocked like normal, but it's completely silent. Since then, he's posted hundreds of videos from places that are normally crammed with tourists: the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the streets of London, amusement parks, the New York City subway, all empty. He claims that he slipped into another dimension, an eerily empty alternate reality version of Earth. His followers throw him challenges, telling him to visit specific spots to prove he's really alone, but every time, it's just him on camera. One of the craziest updates came when someone told him to go to Berlin airport to try and escape. He says he fell asleep in the lounge, then woke up on a massive ship at sea. For 6 days, he explored it before jumping into a lifeboat and making it back to land. And just like that, he was back to wandering through a perfectly normal-looking world where he's apparently the only person alive. Now, of course, I don't know whether you believe in the alternate reality thing or not, but it is impressive that he's managed to film so many iconic locations with no one else in frame. I don't know if he just happens to find super specific times, maybe there's some editing trickery going on, but I think this is an interesting little art project aside from the mystery. Reddit user 17DemonDickS's shared a creepy story with the heading, "I think I stepped into a parallel universe for a moment." They were about 18 or 19 at the time, still living in their childhood home. It was summer, early afternoon, and they were heading out for one of their usual walks to a nearby park, something they'd done almost every day for years. They slipped on their shoes, opened the front door, and stepped outside, and instantly knew that something was off. Nothing looked different. The ravine next to the house, the tree in the yard, the driveway, the neighbors' homes, everything was exactly where it should be, but everything just felt inexplicably wrong. The Redditor said it was like reality itself had shifted in some subtle but deeply unsettling way. They stood there for a moment trying to shake off the feeling before heading down the driveway. About halfway down, they spotted their neighbor across the street tending to his garden. The neighbor looked up, froze. His face went completely pale like he'd just seen a ghost. The neighbor slowly opened his mouth about to say something with this look of terror on his face, but before the Redditor could respond, they were back inside the house, standing at the front door again, hand on the handle, about to step out. This time though, when they opened the door, the neighborhood felt completely normal again. The neighbor wasn't even outside anymore. Demon D's decided to skip the walk that day. Years later, they still can't explain the feeling. The thing that bothers them the most isn't even the sudden teleportation or the neighbor's terrified expression. It was indescribable wrongness, like they were looking at a completely different version of their own street. Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain were English academics who, in August of 1901, took a trip to the Palace of Versailles in France. After touring the main palace, they decided to walk through the gardens where Marie Antoinette used to hang out. They got lost and missed the turn from the main avenue, ending up on a quiet lane. Moberly noticed a woman shaking a white cloth out of the window, while Jourdain saw an old deserted farmhouse with a plow outside. That's when they started to notice this heavy, oppressive feeling wash over them. Moberly later described it as if, quote, everything suddenly looked unnatural, therefore unpleasant. Even the trees seemed to become flat and lifeless, like wood worked in tapestry, end quote. Then they came across two men who looked like gardeners but wore long coats and three-cornered hats, very old-timey clothing, even for 1901. Close by, a man sat near a garden kiosk, his face covered in smallpox. As they finally crossed a bridge into the gardens, Moberly spotted a woman sketching on the grass. The lady wore a light summer dress and a white hat. Her hair was old-fashioned. Moberly thought she was a tourist at first, but later became convinced that what they'd both seen was Marie Antoinette herself. Neither mentioned what happened for a week. but after comparing notes and researching some of the history of the place, they believe they had somehow stepped back to August 10th of 1792, just weeks before the French monarchy was overthrown. The story blew up when they published it in 1911 under fake names in their book An Adventure. Years later, they found an old map that showed the bridge they said they crossed, and that bridge wasn't on any newer maps, cause it no longer existed. It hadn't for a long time. To this day, this is still one of the most famous and well-documented time slip stories in existence. Reddit user Albert Norman 2069 shared a wild story about what he thinks was a brief trip into an alternate timeline. He says it happened on June 28th, 2014. His day started normally, waking up, brushing his teeth, eating breakfast, and getting in the car for work. But when he switched on the radio, things suddenly got strange. Instead of his usual music station, there was a news talk show playing. The host was talking about a recent victory in the Great War, praising troops in the military. At first, Albert figured it was just about the ongoing withdrawal from Afghanistan, but then the host started talking about a victory in Italy and how this win would finally end a second Great Depression. He was kind of confused, but figured it was just a radio play or something, so he just kind of brushed it all off. This wasn't the last he'd heard of this, though. Later during lunch, Albert overheard coworkers chatting about that same victory in Italy and something about preserving unity. They also kept repeating the numbers 33-13. Finally, he was like, all right, what's going on here? So he asked, what the hell they were talking about, and they looked at him all offended and basically told him that his question was disrespectful to the troops. That's when Albert noticed a coworker named Sam was missing. But disturbingly, when he asked about him, nobody seemed to know who Sam was at all. On his way home, Albert took a different route through the city, and things just got more unsettling. He noticed there were these banners celebrating the victory, showing Marines landing on a foreign beach. The city also looked way poorer than he remembered. There were abandoned storefronts. Some buildings actually looked like they were crumbling. At home, he turned on CNN, and the anchors were discussing how American forces had defeated Italian logistical targets with minimal civilian casualties, how insurgencies in Greece and Ireland were winding down. At this point, Albert was kind of getting terrified. He had no idea what was going on. Was he losing his mind? Was this a bad dream? Well, he did what anyone would do. He went straight to Wikipedia. That's when he found a detailed page about a war he'd never heard of. It said Europe had collapsed into a civil war with Greece and Ireland occupied by coalition forces facing nationalist insurgencies, that the US was deep in a depression, and the global financial system was in chaos. Albert took screenshots of the pages. After he woke up, those pictures were still on his phone. Yes, he shared them on a Reddit post. This experience led him to wonder about parallel universes, pointing to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. The idea that every decision creates a split, a different timeline. So Albert thinks somehow, just for a day, he slipped into one of those darker alternate realities. From a now deleted Reddit user comes an odd encounter at a gas station. Back in 2016, I was driving home late at night after visiting a friend. It was a route I knew well, just a long stretch of highway with barely any traffic at that hour. About halfway home, I noticed a gas station up ahead. The thing is, I didn't remember ever seeing one there before. It didn't look new either. It looked old, like straight out of the 80s. Flickering neon lights, a beat-up old truck parked out front. It even had an old-school gas pump. Well, I needed gas anyway, so I pulled in. Plus, there was just no way I wasn't checking this place out. The moment I stepped out of my car, everything felt off. Inside, there was an old man behind the counter staring at a tiny TV. I asked if they took cards, but he just shook his head. Cash only. I didn't have cash, so I turned around to leave. As soon as I made it back to my car, it struck me just how weird this situation was. An old gas station that I'd never seen before along a stretch of road I'd driven down plenty of times that apparently only took cash. I shuddered a little and then drove home and tried not to think about the experience before writing it down today. Honestly, I still don't know where I stopped that night or maybe even when. In 1975, Travis Walton and his logging crew were driving home after a long day working in the Apache Site Reeves National Forest when they spotted something very bizarre. A glowing red light hovering over the trees. As they got closer, they saw what looked like a metallic craft suspended in midair. Most people would hit the gas and get out of there, but Walton had other ideas. Ignoring his crew's warnings, he got out of the truck and walked toward it. And that's when a beam of light shot down from the craft, knocking him off his feet, lifting him into the air. That was enough for the rest of the crew. They panicked and sped off. Guilt quickly set in though, and they decided to turn back. But when they returned a few minutes later, Walton was gone. A massive search followed, but no sign of Walton turned up for 5 days. Suddenly though, he reappeared. Confused and disoriented, he ended up telling everyone eventually that he'd been taken aboard a UFO, where he encountered strange beings that seemed to be experimenting on him. He claimed he managed to fight them off and escape deeper into the ship before waking up on the side of the road with no idea how much time had passed. The case became one of the most well-documented alien abduction stories in history, probably, especially since Walton and his crew all passed multiple polygraph tests. This next case, often referred to as the friendship case, might not fit the typical missing person story, but it's got a weird, unsettling angle that connects to the idea of people vanishing, at least temporarily, and coming back with some pretty wild stories. It's not going to go where you think it's going to go. So, during a stretch of time between the 1950s and 60s, a group of people in Italy claimed that they were regularly in contact with extraterrestrial beings. They were supposedly peaceful, highly advanced, and deeply invested in guiding humanity toward a better future. According to those involved, the aliens would take them to hidden bases on Earth, sharing advanced knowledge about science and spirituality, and the importance of unity. Some claim to have spent significant time with these beings, and as if this whole thing wasn't strange enough, some believe that in the course of these interactions, a few of the humans may have gotten a little too close to their extraterrestrial friends, possibly leading to the birth of alien-human hybrids. Now, obviously, this is a pretty nutty case, no pun intended, but if this story is to be believed, we've got a situation where ordinary people vanished, at least for short periods, and were taken to who knows where. Apparently, though, they came back changed. This next story comes from another, now deleted Reddit user, and goes as follows. In 2019, I went on a solo hiking trip in Washington. It was a well-traveled trail, nothing dangerous. I planned to camp overnight and head back the next morning. Around 1 p.m., I set up camp in a clearing, and that's when things got weird. I noticed that the forest was silent. There were no birds to be heard, no wind, just this heavy stillness. The sky had also changed. It wasn't dark, but the light had this washed out grayish tint. I was uneasy at this point, but decided it just wasn't enough to get too freaked out about. Maybe a storm was coming. Well, then about an hour later, I heard the voices, muffled like a bad recording of human speech. I stuck my head out of my tent expecting to see someone, but the clearing was empty. Now, I must have fallen asleep soon after this because I don't remember much after that. But when I woke up, the clearing looked different. The trees seemed taller, the air was heavy. At this point, I was just freaked out and decided it was time to head home. Thing is, the trail was missing. At least I couldn't find it. I walked for hours in the direction I'd come, but I never seemed to get anywhere. It was actually getting dark now. Finally, I made it out though and reached my car. I checked the time, and that's when I lost it. Less than 2 hours had passed? This was impossible. I could have sworn I was out there for 5 hours. Well, I haven't gone down that trail since, and I never will again. In August of 1976, 4 friends set out for a camping trip in the Allagash Wilderness in Maine, hoping for some peaceful time away. But things took a strange turn when they spotted a bright light in the sky on their second night, which then quickly disappeared. 2 nights later, the same light appeared again, only this time it was much more intense. In fact, they described it looking almost like the sun. As they watched, it followed them along the water. One of the men, Charlie, tried to signal SOS using his flashlight, and that's when the light shot a beam toward him. When they returned to camp, everything felt off. The fire they'd left burning was out, and they were completely drained as if hours had passed. Days went by without any other strange sightings, but But when the men got home, they began having these unsettling dreams, all of them similar and terrifying. It wasn't until 1988 that they finally sought help from UFO researcher Ray Fowler and decided to undergo hypnosis. Under hypnosis, they all recalled being abducted by aliens, terrifying creatures who performed medical exams on them and even took their skin and bodily fluids. What was most chilling was that each of their stories matched almost perfectly, and they even passed polygraph tests. Amelia Earhart's disappearance is one of the most famous unsolved mysteries of all time. In 1937, she set off on a mission to become the first woman to fly around the world. But on July 2nd, her plane vanished somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. The last radio transmission from her reported she was running low on fuel near Howland Island, and then nothing. The massive search that followed turned up nothing, and Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan were declared lost at sea. That's the official story, but over the years, people have reported strange sightings and theories that suggest she might not have died in a crash. Some claim she was captured by the Japanese and held as a prisoner of war. Others believe she assumed a new identity and lived out her days in secrecy. Some claim to have actually spotted her with their own eyes. And in 2017, a supposed long-lost photograph surfaced from US military archives and was shared online. Some said there was a woman looking a lot like Earhart and a man who could be Noonan on a dock in the Marshall Islands. In Sydney, Australia, 1987, Gabriel Nagy went out to run errands like any normal day. He even called his wife Pamela, saying that he'd be home for lunch, but he never showed up. Pamela called the police, and soon after, a disturbing discovery was made. Gabriel's car was found burned out on the side of the road, and there was no sign of Gabriel himself. There was a massive search, but the case quickly went cold. That is, until 2 weeks later, when police discovered someone had withdrawn money from Gabriel's account over 100 miles away. But after that, the trail went dead again for 20 years. Right before Gabriel was about to be declared legally dead, one final search by a determined constable led to a shocking discovery. A man in Mackay had recently undergone surgery. His name was Ron Saunders, but hospital records showed that he also went by Gabriel Nagy. When authorities contacted him, he told them that he had barely remembered the last 2 decades. He'd been living on the streets, doing odd jobs with only fragments of memory from his past life. Doctors suspected that he'd suffered severe head trauma in the accident that burned out his car, leading to a rare case of amnesia. But something didn't quite add up. If he still knew his name, why hadn't he tried to find his family? Why not contact the police? Well, whatever the answer, the family was reunited in the end. What would you do if you realized your work could be used for something catastrophic? In the case of Italian physicist Ettore Majorana, he might have chosen to vanish. In 1938, Majorana, a brilliant scientist working on cutting-edge atomic research, boarded a ship from Palermo to Naples, but when the ship arrived, he was nowhere to be found. Witnesses confirmed that he'd gotten on the boat, but no one saw him get off. There were no reports of foul play either, and the weather had been calm. For years, people wondered if he'd been kidnapped, killed, fled into hiding. It wasn't until 2011 that a new clue finally came about. A photograph taken in Argentina in the 50s of a man who looked exactly like Majorana. Facial recognition experts found 10 points of similarity, meaning it was very likely him, but he barely looked like he'd aged. The leading theory is that Majorana, realizing his work on neutrinos could be used for nuclear weapons, deliberately disappeared. Some believe he may have even worked on early atomic research before realizing the implications and choosing to disappear and start over. But to this day, we still can't say for sure. On May 25th, 1985, police in Aurora, Colorado were called to a shopping mall about a woman in distress. She had no ID, no memory of who she was, and was carrying only an empty notepad and a car key. She was taken to a hospital where she spent 4 months trying to piece together her past, even reaching out to local news outlets for help, but nothing turned up. With no answers, she decided to start fresh. She changed her name to Jane D and moved to Alaska, where she built a whole new life, marrying, having 2 sets of twins, and settling down. 12 years passed, and that's when a co-worker of hers happened to see a news broadcast from Seattle about a missing woman named Jody Roberts. The photo was unmistakable. Jane D was Jody Roberts, an investigative journalist who had disappeared from Washington State in 1985. But what happened? How had she completely forgotten who she was? Long-term amnesia this severe is usually caused by extreme trauma or an epileptic event. Roberts had no history of epilepsy, and before vanishing, she'd emptied her bank account and taken her cats to a shelter. It looked like she'd planned to disappear, but to this day, the truth's never come out. She still goes by Jane D and is intensely private a person, not interested in speaking to the press. She has no social media. It does make you wonder though, if something happened, something to do with her journalism job that made her feel the need to get away. A man named Russ Kellett from North Yorkshire, England, came out with some pretty wild claims a few years back, and when various news sites told his story online, some people just memed the hell out of him, others were absolutely giddy. The story is pretty insane, but it is also pretty entertaining, and I'll just say, I'd love it to be real. So Kellett says that he's been taken by aliens at least 60 times. That's 60. Starting when he was just a boy. He describes waking up in a strange tunnel-like space, then finding himself on an operating table surrounded by towering Dracula-like beings who pumped a mysterious liquid into his body, supposedly turning him into a super soldier. For over 30 years, Kellett insists he's been part of an alien military force fighting against a race known as the Dragos, massive reptilian creatures with dragon-like heads. He says time moves differently in this war, with 4 hours on Earth equaling 4 years on distant planets, and that he's been battling not just in space, but here on Earth too, in places like the UK, other parts of Europe and South America. He even claims to have been transported through time, using a strange glass sphere inside a room with a chessboard patterned floor, sent to fight in conflicts across the universe. And I will just leave it at that.
Number 5, the blue rock. Alright, after that, let's the same fake memory. Number 3, the cold spot. Alright, back to science once again. When the Big Bang created our universe, the wavelengths of light expanded, changing the color and temperature of the universe to what we now perceive as black, creating the cosmic microwave background which maps the creation of our universe according to the Big Bang. While scientists were studying this background, they discovered what they referred to as the cold spot, being the size of 1.8 billion light years. While also being colder, it apparently also contains 20% less matter than it should. So how could they possibly explain the existence of this cold spot and why it is the way that it is? Well, experts believe that this is evidence of a parallel universe having crashed into ours through quantum entanglement, impact forcing energy out of the area and leaving behind the cold spot. Number 2, the Hadron Collider. Researchers at the Super Collider in Switzerland started researching in 2015, hoping to find evidence of alternate universes. They have done various different tests trying to find these parallel universes that would not exist in the visible 3 dimensions of our own universe, but instead be made up of dimensions that we cannot perceive. One scientist theorized that the Hadron Collider could reveal particles that could only exist in these other dimensions, and being able to see them would give us almost undeniable evidence of the existence of parallel universes in line with our own. She said that these particles would have the exact same properties of particles in our own universe, but would have greater mass. All of this is still theoretical right now, but plenty of theoretical things from the past have been discovered and made reality, so it may not be long. Number 1, the Taured Traveler. In 1954, a European plane landed in Tokyo. On the plane was a man who spoke several different languages, and he told the people there that he was visiting on business. He then gave them his passport, which said that he was coming from a place called Taured. If you've never heard of this country, then don't worry, you're not alone. That's because it doesn't actually exist, and it's a fictional country that is in between the borders of France and Spain. The man's passport was visa stamped, and he even provided a bank statement from the Taured Bank. His documents were taken and held in airport security while the man was left in a guarded hotel room waiting for police to arrive. But when they got there, the man was gone. People believe believe that this man was a visitor from a parallel universe where European history was different and led to the creation of the country of Tauret. Number 10. The London Hammer. Many times in history, people have found objects that they think could be evidence of a parallel universe intersecting with our own. Those thoughts were raised again when in 1936 a hammer was found in London, Texas. While on a walk, a couple found a hammer that looked like ones that had been used in the late 1800s. So cool, they found an old hammer. Well, there's actually much more to it. The hammer had not rusted at all and still hasn't since it's been found. And it was also found encased in rock that dated back to the Cretaceous period. For those of you who don't know, that's around 100 million years ago. This is obviously weird because most people agree that humans only started popping up around 200,000 years ago. So how could this hammer have come to exist? Some people believe that it's the remnant of a parallel universe where humans developed long before they did on our Earth, or that it had potentially traveled back in time. If you live in Texas and want to check out this infamous hammer for yourself, you can find it at Carl Bowe's Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. Number 9. Black holes. The existence of black holes is one of the greatest yet unexplained wonders of our universe, the first picture of a black hole only having been taken back in 2019. So how are they evidence of parallel universes? Well, let's get into some science here. Black holes are so hard to study because everything we've sent out there to try and get information is never seen again, people assuming that it's destroyed upon entering the hole. But Stephen Hawking said that whatever enters a black hole does come out, but it comes out in another universe. Because of the law of conservation of mass, even if something is destroyed, evidence of its presence would still be able to be seen. They would be visible in hair-like images that trace its path into the black hole. But Stephen Hawking noticed that evidence showed these hairs were not present, meaning the item has completely disappeared from our universe. And I'm really hoping this is making sense. Stephen Hawking says that this is good evidence that they have been transported to another universe, saying black holes are not the eternal prisons that we once thought. Number 8. Cloud City. In October of 2015, Chinese citizens were shocked by what appeared to be a floating city within the sky. Multiple people taking photos and videos of the cityscape that seemed to loom above them within the clouds. The shape was far too specific to brush it off as being anything man-made, and looked to clearly be a cloud city. People were left wondering what it could be, and theories popped up of parallel universes or even secret holographic technology. There was no time to answer these questions or speculate if it had even happened at all, as the exact same thing took place again in China in March of the following year. More photos and videos popping up again of the incident. Many people believe that this supposed city in the sky is evidence of another universe crossing over into our own. Feel free to take a look at the pictures for yourself and make your own decision. Number 7. Deja vu. Have you ever been walking down the street and gotten the sudden feeling like you'd done that before, even though you haven't? This is a phenomenon that is known as deja vu, or already seen. As of yet, there is no real scientific explanation for why people all over the world experience these feelings. And there are theories that range from memory problems to glitches in the Matrix. People who believe that deja vu is evidence of parallel universes describe it like this. Think of a radio where you can only hear one frequency at a time. The parallel universes beside us are at different frequencies. However, it's possible that for one small moment the universes might vibrate at the same frequency and become in sync. Since parallel universes are all supposedly just slightly different, when these in-sync moments happen and you believe that you've already had this conversation before, it's possible that you feel that way because you did, just in a parallel universe. Number 6. The double slit experiment. Okay, this one is very sciencey, so bear with me. The double slit experiment was performed in the 1920s and seemed to offer convincing evidence of potential multiple parallel realities. The theory proposes that if tennis balls were fired at a wall through a single slit, then the marks on the wall would line up with the slit. So if you created 2 slits, it would create 2 lines on the wall. And if you fired waves through the wall, they would go through the splits, but still continue to spread out and leave multiple lines on the wall. And electrons should theoretically act in the same way that tennis balls do, but they didn't. They also made multiple lines as though they had been interacting with each other in the way that the waves did. But even when fired one at a time, it still made two sets of waves. For this to happen, it would mean that each electron somehow managed to travel through both slits. When they tried to film the electrons, they instead went back to just forming two lines like tennis balls. So this suggests that while parallel universes may be interacting with our own, we just don't have the technology to see it.
In 1923, the Brazilian village of Rio Verde was reportedly discovered completely abandoned. A passing group came across the town and found schools with desks neatly lined up, homes with food left on tables, and weapons stacked carefully in public buildings. But not a single person was there. The population, which once numbered around 600, had seemingly vanished overnight. Government records on the incident are thin, but newspaper clippings from the time confirm this discovery. Unlike other famous disappearances, Rio Verde never returned to the maps. It just ceased to exist. Some researchers suggest the townspeople fled from bandits or political violence. Others think the entire population walked into some other dimension altogether, leaving behind a ghost town that is just frozen in time. The Dyatlov Pass is often remembered as Russia's greatest mystery, but the Khamar-Daban Mountains hide a tragedy just as strange. So in 1993, a group of 7 hikers, led by instructor Ludmila Korovina, set out on a trek through the mountains. Suddenly, 6 of them got ill in a really horrifying fashion. They screamed, they tore off their clothing, they vomited BLOOD, and they collapsed. Only one survivor staggered back to safety, incoherent with shock. The official explanation is that it was hypothermia or exhaustion, but the symptoms don't really seem to match. Locals claim the mountains are cursed and that certain areas contain dangerous, invisible zones. Conspiracy theorists argue that the hikers stepped into a toxic pocket or an energy field that doesn't belong to our reality, a place where even the air itself was lethal. In the barren desert outside Las Cruces sits a place that locals refuse to visit after sunset, a stretch of land known as the Devil's Playground. From a distance, it looks like any other patch of sand and scrub, but people who wander into it often describe eerie and unsettling experiences. Hikers will report sudden time distortion, strange shifts in light, and a creeping sense of disorientation, as if the land itself is tilting under them. Compasses fail, watches stop. Some people claim that they feel like they're being pulled in different directions at once. One of the most disturbing cases involves a group of campers who set up their tents on the edge of the playground. According to 2 survivors, their friend stepped away from the campfire to relieve himself, only walking a few yards into the desert. Moments later, he was gone. The men searched frantically and discovered his footprints in the sand, but they ended in the middle of open desert, as if he'd been lifted straight into the air. There were search parties, but no trace of him was ever recovered. In 1872, lumber workers boarded a small steamer heading upriver on the Rupert River in Quebec. Witnesses on shore claimed they saw the boat disappear into a heavy fog and never came back. When authorities searched downstream, there was no wreckage, no bodies, and no trace of the vessel. Later expeditions reported finding a patch of river that felt wrong, unnaturally still, quiet. Compasses spun wildly near it, refusing to settle. Locals began to say the boat and its crew had crossed over into another world. Fishermen to this day avoid the bend, warning that anyone who lingers there too long might vanish, just like the men aboard that lost steamer. During World War I in 1915, Australian and New Zealand soldiers fighting at Gallipoli reported one of the strangest disappearances in wartime history. According to eyewitness accounts, the 4th Norfolk Regiment marched into a low-lying mist on the battlefield and just never came out. The soldiers who watched claimed they, expected to see the men re-emerge on the other side in moments, but the fog seemed to just swallow them whole. When the war ended, their bodies were never recovered, and the regiment was officially listed as missing. In total, 267 men went missing. Some skeptics argue that men may have been captured by Ottoman forces or killed in ways that just left no trace, use your imagination. But to many, the story of an entire regiment disappearing into a cloud seems to suggest something much stranger, as if the fog itself was a doorway to another world. In the tiny village of Eidsborg, Norway, locals whisper about a stretch of country road that does not behave like a normal road. Travelers claim that when driving late at night, the road seems to shift under them. Instead of leading them home, it appears to bend and curve into woods or meadows that shouldn't exist. In the 50s, two farmers who'd spent the evening drinking at a tavern set off along this road with their horse and cart. They never arrived at their destination. Days later, the horse and cart were found abandoned in the middle of the road. The men themselves were nowhere to be found. No footprints led away, no signs of a struggle were there. Some believe they may have stumbled into a bog or river, but others say the road itself could have opened up into another place, and the men just drove off the map. High in the Indian Himalayas at the base of the Pindari Glacier is a small settlement where strange stories have been told for centuries. Travelers who hike the glacier often report hearing voices in the fog. Sometimes the voices are familiar, calling out the names of friends or family members, but those who step toward the sound often disappear. In one especially haunting case, a British officer in the early 1900s was said to have chased a woman dressed in white along the trail. His men followed behind but eventually lost sight of him. The only thing they found was his walking stick resting on a rock. He was never seen again. Villagers believe the glacier hides a passage to another side of existence and avoid traveling near it at night. To them, the fog is alive, luring victims into another world. Beneath the University of York lies the Heslington Tunnel, a long abandoned underground passage that students in the 60s once used for dares. The tunnel quickly gained a reputation after one disturbing story. Two students ventured in late one night, determined to prove how brave they were. Only one came back out though. The survivor claimed that halfway through his friend stopped walking, got all pale, and then faded away right in front of him, as if the air itself had swallowed him whole. Police searched every inch of the tunnel, because they didn't believe the kid of course, but they found no trace of this missing student. Eventually the university sealed the tunnel off, but stories are still around. People still report hearing voices echoing beyond the walls, as though those who vanished are still trapped down there, waiting to be heard. The Mojave Desert is littered with abandoned mine shafts that stretch for miles underground. Explorers often warn never to go in, and for good reason. In the 1990s, a group of amateur spelunkers entered one shaft near Death Valley. Hours later, they came back confused and disoriented, claiming to have lost track of time. Their watches all displayed different hours, like each one had been traveling in a separate timeline. Then in 2014, another explorer went missing while filming inside a shaft. His camera recorded the descent before abruptly cutting out. Rescue teams later recovered his gear, but the man himself was gone, without a trace. Some say collapses or toxic gases have been the cause. Others argue that the mines are far older than they appear, possibly connecting to places beyond our understanding. Reunion Island, located in the Indian Ocean, is covered with volcanic rock. Beneath the surface is sprawling lava tubes carved by ancient eruptions. In the 1800s, these caves were said to have provided shelter for enslaved people fleeing plantations. Many who fled inside were never seen again. Even today, modern cavers report hearing distant chanting echoing through the tunnels, or seeing lights far below where no human should be. In 1989, two experienced explorers vanished during an expedition into one of the deeper tubes. The ropes were later found severed, cut so cleanly that experts couldn't tell how it happened. No bodies were ever found. Local legend insists the lava tubes are more than just caves though. They are a doorway into an underworld that doesn't seem to belong to ours.
This is a great way to transition into the mirror image universe theory. It could also link to the deja vu theory, but this theory specifically focuses on the moments before the Big Bang, and scientists coming up with a hypothesis that there was a universe completely mirror image to our version today. However, the only difference is that time is moving backwards in that universe. I'm not gonna try and get deep with it, but the basic understanding of this theory is that the Big Bang is the center point of time. And because scientists believe in heavy symmetry within the universe, when it happened, it also created a negative version of time of our universe alongside ours. So, when you think of cracking an egg, what would happen instead in the other universe is that it would start out from the yolk on the ground and turn back into the egg. This theory started back in 2015, when some scientists were up in Antarctica researching high-energy particles. What we did know before is that there are high-energy particles coming towards Earth, which from my understanding is because our universe is constantly expanding out. outward. However, they discovered high energy particles going away from our Earth in the opposite direction, as if they were going back in time. There was something pulling or stretching these particles the opposite way, as if the universe is expanding in another direction simultaneously. Let's take a brain breather with some Mandela effects. This one, specifically from Toy Story, is new to me. Do you remember Woody's catchphrase being, "There's a snake in my boot"? Because that's how I remember it, and the majority of people who grew up with it. But we were wrong, because the actual phrase of it goes, "There's a snake in my boots." It was plural, and it was never singular. But of course, the internet didn't agree with this, with the biggest reason being that it grammatically doesn't make sense. The proper sentence should be, "There are snakes in my boots." And it also doesn't help with the fact that the Woody toys that came out all say, "There's a snake in my boot." There is no plural for those. So what gives? There was only one Reddit comment claiming that Pixar confirmed it's always been boot and not boots, but I haven't been able to find an article on that. How do you guys remember it? Tell me down in the comments below. Imagine finding a watch while you're exploring a tomb. Of course, watches have been around for quite a while at this point, but what makes the famous tiny Swiss watch so special? In 2008, archaeologists discovered a remarkable piece of metal that was the size of a ring, bearing the face of a watch that was marked specifically at 10:06. On the back was the word Swiss engraved. This was found in a tomb that had been sealed away for more than 400 years, and yet this watch was only 100 years old. How is that possible? Especially when Switzerland wasn't an established country at the time. The tomb was speculated to have been created during the Ming Dynasty that ruled from 1368 to 1644, and watches were apparently not a thing in that area at the time. My question, however, though, is how sure are we that it was sealed for that long? What are the odds that someone had gone in there prior to the archaeologist but just decided on not taking or touching anything? It's possible, but then why did they leave the watch ring? People obviously speculate that there were maybe time travelers that left it as a clue for their existence, since many of those already exist across the internet. People love to believe we live in a simulation, with major ones being caught when watching sports. This specific video, uploaded by Highlight Heaven on YouTube, arranged a variety of clips from football that feed into this simulation theory, and there were a few that stuck out to me. The first two clips involve some very synchronized movement of football players getting up. Simultaneously, at the exact same time, their movements are mirrored perfectly, down to the hand placements, to the tempo, you name it. The biggest one that people have their eyes on is when one of the football players does this really weird, almost floating maneuver to get up. They barely use their hands as they hoist themselves from off the ground, as if all their power is coming from the balls of their feet. Sure, they have the momentum of pushing upward, but after that it looks like it's all in the foot power. But I do have a theory for these weird movements, to which I feel many of you have figured out by now. Football players are constantly practicing and drilling in certain movements, right? They've also probably been practicing the quickest and most efficient way of getting up when they get tackled, with one of these ways being the weird floating technique. I'm not a football player, but I've taken movement classes where we are drilled in certain ways of getting up properly and quickly. It's definitely a neat trick that these guys do here, and I can see how it would become an optical illusion at certain angles. The man from Torrid. I'm not sure how legit this story is, but still interesting nonetheless. On one sunny day somewhere in July in 1954, an ordinary-looking man arrived at Haneda Airport in Tokyo. There was nothing strange about the way he was dressed, sporting a nice suit and tie with a groomed beard. He was fairly familiar with Japanese, so no red flags thus far. It wasn't until officials noticed on his passport that he was coming from a country called Torrid. There is no such thing as Torrid, that we're all aware of, and when this man was confronted by police as a possible fraud or threat, he got extremely frustrated and tried to explain that it is in fact real and has been around for 1,000 years. So they got him to try and explain where on the map it was located, and apparently it was supposed to be between Spain and France, but he had no idea why it wasn't showing up on our maps, as he kept repeating he's made multiple trips to Japan before. He even had papers to support his case. However, before they could take a look at them, the man suddenly disappeared for from his hotel room, one that was located on the 7th floor with no balcony. The police tried to keep him there while they figured things out, so they had no clue where he went. A lot of people use this theory to support the claims of parallel universes, but I don't know. It sounds a little too good of a story to be true. Noah, the alleged time traveler from 2030. Back in 2018, this guy had taken the world by storm. Although supposedly being from 2030, he's traveled all across the spectrum to the years 2060, 1999, and the year 2120, to which he also supposedly had video proof of what it would all look like. He explains that the clip he took was from Las Vegas and showcases flying cars to tall, futuristic looking buildings and a very peculiar looking orange sky. Noah explained, "The red clouds are global warming. You can see it's everywhere. I can remember it being incredibly hot. I'm pretty sure they are working on it in the future." He also stated that some really crazy predictions for the future, some key ones being Martin Luther King Jr.'s granddaughter will become president, scientists live on Mars, Instagram becoming a thing of the past, cures for illnesses, and finally being able to talk to aliens. Noah also disclosed taking anti-aging pills that keep him the same age throughout his journeys, since he claims that time traveling makes you gain years. Of course, no one really believed any of this, especially with the video, to most people looking like a cheap 3D rendering. One commenter even pointed out that he's using a phone from our time to show this, rather than some crazy futuristic one. Despite all this though, he took a lie detector test that really put him on the radar, and he passed it with flying colors. What he was saying came out truthfully. But then again, this wasn't done by professionals or with professional equipment, so who's to say if it means it's actually true? The deja vu and parallel universe theory. I had speculated this theory for a few years now, and I'm really happy that other people are discussing it. Majority of us know what deja vu is. A moment in our lives where we get this strange feeling that we've done something like this before. It's French for already seen, and there are some scientific theories for why this happens, such as temporal overlap. This is when the long-term and short-term memories blur together for a moment. Or subconscious familiarity, where your new surroundings have some similarities to an old one. The last being neural delays that create a false feeling that some event has occurred. But I like parallel universes theory better. To explain my favorite version of the theory, a deja vu is when your other self in a different universe and you in this universe accidentally overlap the same timelines. The two of you are living very different experiences, but for some reason we have one, or a few if you're like me, moments in time where the two timelines collide at the exact perfect moment. Our lives perfectly linked up together based on whatever choices we made to get us in that exact same moment of time. I would also love to hear your theories about this down in the comments below.
In 1936, a hammer was found in London, Texas, but this wasn't just any ordinary tool. The hammer was embedded in rock that, according to geological estimates, is around 400 million years old. An era long before humans, let alone their tools, were supposed to exist. This bizarre find has baffled scientists and sparked all sorts of theories, from the possibility of time slips to the idea of alternate realities where different timelines somehow intersected. How could a man-made object end up trapped in ancient rock? The hammer's presence in such an anachronistic setting is more than just a curiosity, it is a mystery that seems to defy the laws of time and logic, making me wonder if it's evidence of a glitch in the fabric of reality itself. I don't know. I can't explain any of these things we're speaking about. I'm just here to report the news and then stress about it later. The connection between Sir Anthony Hopkins and the girl from Petrovka is a story that feels like it was just lifted straight out of the movie itself. While preparing for his role in the film adaptation of the novel, Hopkins was eager to read the book to get a better understanding of his character, a real professional. However, despite searching everywhere, he couldn't find a copy. Then, in a very weird twist of fate, he stumbled upon a copy left on a random park bench, as if the universe had placed it there just for him. The story gets even stranger when Hopkins later met the book's author. During their conversation, the author mentioned that he had lent his last copy of the book to a friend who had unfortunately lost it on a park bench. The chances of Hopkins finding that very copy are so slim that it has to be a glitch in reality where the lines between coincidence and destiny blur. It just makes us wonder, is there some unseen force that was at play just ensuring that Hopkins got his hands on this very elusive book? I don't know, it's just too strange. I can't explain it, it freaks me out. The strange life of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette is filled with many twists and turns, but one particular coincidence stands out as almost too eerie to ignore. On June 21st, 1791, the royal couple was arrested while attempting to escape from France during the height of the French Revolution, a moment that marked the beginning of their tragic downfall. However, what makes this event even more uncanny is a seemingly innocent diary entry made by Louis XVI exactly 18 years earlier. On that same day, June 21st, Louis wrote that he hoped never to undertake a journey on that day again, as if he had some premonition of what the future held. Fast forward almost 2 decades, and the date he had hoped to avoid became the very day his fate was sealed. This peculiar coincidence adds a mysterious layer to their story, making me wonder if this was more than just a quirk of history, perhaps a glitch in reality, where destiny and foresight collided in an unforgettable way. The mysterious case of Joseph Figlock is a story that almost defies belief. In 1950, Figlock, an ordinary man in Detroit, was walking down the street when out of nowhere, a baby fell from a high window and landed directly on him. Both he and the baby survived the frightening incident, okay, don't freak out, with Figlock's presence likely having saved the child's life. As if this wasn't bizarre enough, a year later, Figlock found himself in an almost identical situation. Once again, he was walking the same street and another baby fell from the exact same window and landed on him. Incredibly, both he and the baby survived this second fall as well. The odds of such an event happening once are super low, but twice? It's the kind of coincidence that makes you wonder if reality just glitched. You know, we're back in the loop, we're back in Groundhog's Day. At least this one has a happy ending though, you know? That's something I can get behind. Edgar Allan Poe's novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, written in 1838, tells the haunting tale of a shipwreck where the desperate survivors, driven to the brink, resort to consuming one of their own, ultimately sacrificing a cabin boy named Richard Parker. As eerie as this fictional story is, reality took a chilling turn nearly 50 years later when, in 1884, a real shipwreck unfolded under strikingly similar circumstances. The survivors, stranded and starving, made the harrowing decision to kill and consume one of their own to stay alive. In a twist that seems almost too bizarre to be true, the unfortunate victim was also a cabin boy, and his name was Richard Parker. The uncanny resemblance between Poe's dark fiction and the grim reality that followed has led many to wonder if this was more than just a coincidence. Honestly, I myself, since I heard this story a few years ago, have been convinced that Edgar Allan Poe's a time traveler. I don't know, that seems more logical than anything else, which is crazy to say. The case of the Carol A. Deering is one of those maritime mysteries that continues to baffle and intrigue, and if you've been a fan of this channel for a while, you've definitely heard the story of the Carol A. Deering before. In 1921, the Carol A. Deering, a commercial schooner, was found mysteriously aground off the coast of North Carolina, with its crew having vanished without a trace. The ship was in good condition, the food was laid out as if the crew had simply just stepped away, yet there was no sign of the men anywhere. What makes this case even stranger is that another ship, the SS Hewitt, disappeared around the same time and in the same general area, adding to the sense that something otherworldly might have been at play. These two eerie events happening so close together have fueled theories of mysterious phenomenon. Whether it was a Bermuda Triangle type scenario or an interdimensional glitch or I don't know, something else entirely. The Carol A. Deering remains a haunting reminder that some corners of history might just be too strange to fully understand, leaving us to wonder if these events were part of a reality that momentarily went off script. The Curse of Tamerlane's Tomb is one of those eerie tales that makes you wonder if history sometimes has a supernatural twist. In 1941, Soviet archaeologists decided to open the tomb of Tamerlane, a formidable 14th century Turco-Mongol conqueror. Inside, they found a chilling inscription that read, quote, "Whomsoever opens my tomb shall unleash an invader more terrible than I." Just 3 days later, an invasion of the Soviet Union began, leading many to believe that the curse had been triggered by disturbing the tomb. The timing was so uncanny that it's hard not to see it as something more than just coincidence. Interestingly, the curse is also linked to the Soviet victory in a major battle, which some attribute to Tamerlane's remains being reburied, according to Islamic tradition, shortly before the tide turned. Whether you believe in curses or not, the story of Tamerlane's tomb certainly adds a mysterious layer to the events of that extremely turbulent time in history. The King Umberto I coincidence is one of those stories that feels like it could only happen in a novel, but it's actually entirely true. In 1900, King Umberto I of Italy decided to dine at a small restaurant where he was astonished to find that the owner was his exact double. But the similarities didn't stop there. Both men shared the same name, were born on the same day in the same town, and even married women named Margarita. It's the kind of coincidence that makes you question whether the universe was playing some kind of cosmic joke. The next day, things took an even stranger turn. The restaurant owner was tragically shot and killed. Later, that very same day, King Umberto I met a similar fate as he was assassinated during a public event. The bizarre series of events leaves us wondering if this was more than just chance, a glitch in reality where two identical lives were eerily intertwined and ended in the same tragic manner. I don't know, it's insane. Like, I can't explain that at all. Not even the death thing is like crazy, but it's like, how did they have the same name, born on the same day, in the same town, married people of the same name? Like, that just, it's too much for me. The cross-country coincidence is one of those stories that seems too strange to be true. In 1975, Erskine Lawrence Eben was tragically struck and killed by a taxi while riding his moped in Bermuda. What makes this incident truly mind-boggling is that it was an almost exact replay of a tragedy that occurred exactly 1 year earlier. In 1974, Erskine's brother Neville was also riding that same moped in the same intersection when he was killed by the same taxi, driven by the same driver and even carrying the same passenger. I could not have said same more in that sentence. The chances of such a precise and tragic repetition are so astronomically low that it feels like reality just momentarily glitched, playing out the same fatal scenario twice as if stuck in a loop. It's like a nightmare Groundhog Day. This eerie coincidence leaves us wondering if there's something more at play, something beyond mere chance that defies our understanding of how the world works. If anybody knows, let me know. The phantom time hypothesis is one of the most mind-bending ideas to come out of historical theory, almost like it's from a science fiction novel. Proposed by historian Herbert Illig, this theory suggests that the period between 614 and 911 AD never actually happened. That it was just entirely fabricated. According to Illig, this would mean that we're not actually living in 2024, but rather in 1727, with nearly 300 years of history being nothing more than an elaborate collective illusion. The implications of this theory are staggering, as it would mean that events like Charlemagne's reign and the early Middle Ages were either exaggerated or just completely invented. This idea of a massive historical glitch where entire entire centuries were inserted into the timeline challenges everything we think we know about history. While mainstream historians remain skeptical, the phantom time hypothesis continues to fascinate those who enjoy pondering whether our understanding of the past, and by extension, our present, might be based on a glitch in reality itself. Just one other thing to send me into an existential crisis. I love it. Alright. The mystery of the London Hammer is one of those puzzling discoveries that challenges our understanding of history and just leaves us questioning reality itself.
Sometimes in video games, NPCs will show up in odd spots. They'll disappear into walls, they'll randomly float through the air, suddenly appear on roofs with no obvious access point. It's hilarious. Take these sheep here. What video game is this from, you ask? Well, none. This is a real piece of footage. The clip was posted to Reddit by user DocsHoax, who writes, "A man lost a flock of sheep and found them on the roof of the hayloft. How they got there is unclear. It all happened near Omsk. In the morning, the worker did not find his sheep in the usual place and went to look. The search result was surprising. All the artiodactyl roofers were found on the roof of the neighbor's hayloft. The owner assumed they were scared of something and climbed up. As a result, all the sheep were safely lowered to the ground." You know what would probably have me second guessing if the world around us really exists or not? If everything and everyone just suddenly stopped. This story is called Time Froze. It was posted to Reddit by Electronic Trust 481. I had just gotten off the bus and was waiting for my light to turn green. I had my headphones in, I was jamming out, and then the light finally turned green. None of the cars were moving, so I assumed there was an ambulance. I took one of the headphones out to listen, but I didn't hear any sirens, so I look around and not a single person or car is moving. This lasted about a minute. Finally, I figured, F it, I'm gonna go. And as soon as my foot hit the pavement, everyone starts moving again. The cars, the people. It was like time stopped, and I got this unsettling feeling in my stomach as if they were all waiting on me to make the first move. What made it even more unsettling was everything was quiet. You know how people say when everything goes silent in a forest in the woods, you run? It usually means something predatory is in there with you. That's what it felt like. I still have no explanation for what happened that day. This last video was posted to Reddit by Downtown Issue 1421, and while I'm not saying this is a genuine glitch in the Matrix situation, it is very strange. Notice something odd about this mall? Yeah, all the stores are for smartphones. Downtown Issue 1421 wrote, "I took a last-minute trip to Bolivia. Did the simulation not have enough time to render and just spawned every store in this mall in as smartphone stores?" It's a pretty weird video, and aside from the fact that quite literally, based on the parts of the mall you see in the clip anyway, every store is a smartphone store, there's also something eerie about the mall itself. It has that kind of bizarre, liminal, spacey kind of vibe about it. I just also wonder how all these places stay in business. Like, who's going to all these different cell phone shops? Is the entire mall just one big front for something? Kinda seems like it. The first sign that you're probably experiencing a glitch in reality is that you spot an animal completely frozen in place. Not in a video game you're playing, mind you, but while out in the so-called real world. Sounds crazy? Well, take a look at this. This video was posted to Reddit by user Upstairs Cash 8400. It's kind of unsettling, and if it were just an empty street with this bird in the sky, I wouldn't really think much of it. But what really sells it for me are the mother and son looking up at it, completely confused about what the hell they're looking at. Like, is that what I think it is? A bird just frozen in the sky? Sure, they could be part of the hoax, but if so, they do a good job at playing it off realistic and subtle. This is a very strange video, especially because all there is behind the bird is open air. It's not like it's up close to a building where you could just chalk the bird up to being a sculpture or something. It's just hovering in the air, no string, nothing. You're driving down the road and spot two cars whose license plates are just a little too perfect to be random. This image was posted to Reddit by Veruca Moon. One car with a plate reading peekaboo and one next to it reading I see you. Some may view this as a funny little coincidence. Others may find something slightly more ominous about it, as if the universe itself was subtly winking at the driver as if to say, someone or something is always watching you. Now, if you think, well, these two cars, I mean, they had to have been together. They were just messing with everyone. Well, think again. According to Veruca Moon, the cars went their separate ways at the next intersection. Anyway, whether you believe that this is a genuine case of the Matrix glitching or not, it's a pretty wild coincidence. The universe is just funny sometimes. You see two unrelated men who look almost identical. This image was posted by Talis Gabriel to the Glitch in the Matrix subreddit. Two guys on completely different soccer teams who just happen to look like twins. Not only do they have the same hairstyle and beards, I mean that's surface level, their facial structure is also very eerily similar. And if you're thinking they're the only odd thing about this image, look closer. Yeah, that guy sitting in the back looks a lot like them as well. He's further away and has his hood up, so it's hard to say for sure, but from what I can tell, we might have a glitch in the Matrix triplet situation on our hands. What do you think though? Just a coincidence that these doppelgangers just happen to find themselves in the same place at the same time, or was there a glitch in the simulation? Just what in the hell is going on here? Have you ever seen clouds formed with a perfect straight edge like this? Prince 10001 posted this picture to Reddit and it got a lot of people talking, with the top comment reading, "It's official, we're living in Minecraft." It really does look like the sky in an early 2000s video game that just hasn't finished rendering yet. Like if you were to continue walking closer to those clouds, more would suddenly form out of nowhere on the horizon. Are we living in someone's janky computer game, or are these secret weather control experiments just getting really weird? It's such a surreal looking image, isn't it? It's like some godly entity flew up into the sky and just cut out a section of the clouds like they were trimming their hedges or something. Of course, there's also the possibility that this is just a Photoshop job, but if genuine, that would have been a very strange sight to see. Are you a superstitious person? Do you think stray black cats bring bad luck? If so, you'd probably have a heart attack seeing this. 4 black cats on 4 separate benches posted by Rage Millie with the heading Control-C plus Control-V as a reference to copy and paste. Adding to the weirdness, 3 of these cats are also sitting right at the end of their respective benches. The only odd one out is the one furthest away, and it's in motion, so who knows where it ended up finally sitting down. I gotta say, I love cats, but they can be pretty creepy at times. This may be one of those cases. I mean, it's also very cute, but definitely odd. Would you decide to sit on one of these benches, by the way? I'd be half expecting the cats to swarm me and then start pawing and biting as punishment for moving in on their turf. It's like they're a gang of cats. Once again, is this just a case of cats being weird, or did the program running our simulation just get a little lazy? Don't you hate it when something goes missing? You spend days looking for it, decide to finally replace it, only to have the original item show up again as if it glitched out of reality and then just randomly popped back in. Well, that's exactly what happened to this Reddit user, Your Average Sprite. She posted this image here, with the caption reading, "My husband lost his $70 blade a few months ago. He looked everywhere and just assumed someone had stolen it. He bought another just like the old one. After a couple months, he wakes up today and finds the original sitting in the middle of his cushion on the couch, as if it never left." Super weird, but it's surprising how often this actually happens. The fact that you can look in every nook and cranny for something and then just have it reappear out of nowhere, it's insane. Some of these cases can definitely be chalked up to pranks or just not having looked as thoroughly as you thought, but there are those instances where you just scratch your head and go, I have no logical explanation for this. This next story is called The Disappearing Dog Walker, posted to Reddit by Jin is Equia, who writes, "The other day, coming home from work on my bicycle, it happened that as I approach the curb in front of my house, I see a guy walking his dog, approaching the same spot. So I do that mental calculation you do to avoid awkwardness, and I pull in and hurry a bit to get off the sidewalk onto my front path so I won't be in his way. As I'm picking up my bike to go upstairs, I'm sort of half waiting for him to go by to make sure, but he never did. I look up and down the block, but he's vanished, and there is literally nowhere he could have gone in that same time where I wouldn't still see him. So tonight I'm just doing stuff online, and I keep thinking I hear a cat outside. I looked out the door, nothing. Keep hearing it, so I look again. Across the street is what looks like the same guy walking his dog again. At 3 a.m., by the way. I glanced to one side for a moment and back. Dude is gone again. Not a trace. Stood and watched for a while, just not there. Nowhere he could have gone. I don't know what to think.
This one sounds completely made up, but has a cult following. In the 1970s and 80s, a decommissioned Air Force base at Montauk, Camp Hero, was rumored to host ultra-secret experiments. In 1992, book Montauk Project Experiments in Time claimed that Montauk became ground zero for bizarre research, from mind control and psychic spying to time travel and dimensional portals. According to the story, scientists built a giant radar tower and tunnel system under Camp Hero. Conspiracy believers talk about thousands of people being taken and turned into these mutant super soldiers controlled by the program. The authors claimed they themselves recovered memories of being experimented on there. There's zero official proof that this ever happened, and the book is widely considered fiction, but the legend still persists. To many, this is a glitch in history, a sensational mix of truth and tall tales that links secret Cold War tech with ideas ripped from a comic book. Whether real or not, the Montauk Project conspiracy adds a very strange chapter to our reality's more unbelievable stories. Imagine a thunderstorm. Suddenly, a fiery ball about the size of a basketball floats into the room through the window and then zaps out of existence. Sounds impossible, and that's exactly what numerous eyewitnesses claim happens with ball lightning. Across history, people report glowing spheres darting through air storms, lasting a few seconds and then vanishing or exploding. Scientists have taken these reports seriously. In fact, a recent review notes that thousands of eyewitness accounts exist, but no one has a solid theory for ball lightning. Instruments rarely capture it since it's unpredictable, so most evidence is anecdotal. The lack of consensus means ball lightning remains a genuine unsolved mystery in atmospheric physics. In other words, nature itself can occasionally glitch, creating luminous orbs that defy explanation and leave observers scratching their heads. Here's a glitch from the world of radio. Imagine you hit the button on your ham radio and call out, "Hello." Then 10 seconds later, you come back on the radio answering yourself. That is the bizarre, long-delayed echo phenomenon. First recorded in 1927 by Norwegian hobbyist Jørgen Hals, he heard a faint echo of a Dutch radio station's signal about 3 seconds after the original transmission. To this day, occasionally a strong radio pulse will return with a multi-second delay, far longer than normal skywave bounces, which take fractions of a second. Scientists have proposed everything from Earth's magnetosphere reflections to bouncing off spacecraft, but there is no consensus explanation. It's a genuine time warp effect in real life. You speak into the ether and then hear an answer way later, as if reality itself slowed down the signal. Late at night, you tune your shortwave radio and suddenly a monotone voice starts reciting random numbers. 7, 3, 4, over and over again. No music, no announcer, just mysterious numbers. These are numbers stations, and they date back to at least World War I. To most of us, they sound spooky and inexplicable, but they are real. Espionage experts believe these stations broadcast coded messages to spies in the field. The sequences of numbers are prearranged codes. Only the intended listener with a matching key can decode them. The stations often have catchy nicknames, and they pop up at scheduled times or seemingly sometimes at random. Despite being understood as spy tools, they feel mysterious, strangers on the airwaves shouting numbers with no explanation. Amateur sleuths still hunt for new stations and try to crack their codes, number stations are a real-life oddity, a ghostly radio background of human history that feels as if reality is speaking in cipher. The harsh Ural Mountains of 1959 saw one of history's most gruesome mysteries. A group of 9 experienced Russian hikers set up camp on the slope of a mountain pass now named Dyatlov Pass, but something terrifying happened that night. Searchers later found the tent slashed open from the inside, and the hikers' belongings were left behind. The bodies were scattered around. 2 were found half-dressed near a fire as if they fled the tent in panic. Some of the deceased had bizarre injuries. 1 had a fractured skull, another a twisted neck. 2 were missing their eyes, and 1 woman had no tongue. The Soviet investigators could only rule it as an unknown compelling force that had taken their lives. Decades later, explanations range from avalanches to military tests to Yeti attacks, but none fits all the facts. In short, this remains an unsolved glitch in history. People found dead under inexplicable conditions with no clear culprit. I know depending on who you ask, some say that this case is solved, but the Dyatlov Pass incident still haunts researchers because reality refuses to make sense of what happened that night. Imagine a World War II destroyer disappearing into a green fog. Literally vanishing. That's the claim of the legendary Philadelphia experiment. According to lore, in October 1943, the USS Eldridge was outfitted with secret equipment that rendered it invisible and even teleported it 200 miles away. Witnesses allegedly saw a green mist, and when the ship reappeared, crewmen were inexplicably fused to the metal or driven insane. The US Navy, however, has debunked this story. Official archives say no such teleportation experiment ever occurred, and that Eldridge was never even in Philadelphia at the time. Still, the tale persists as a mind-bending glitch, a mix of rumor, a novel, and possibly misinterpreted World War II tests. Picture walking on a beach and stumbling over a rotten, strange beast, a fur-covered blob with sharp teeth and no eyes. That is exactly what happened at Montauk, New York in 2008. A hunter found a decaying carcass washed ashore and snapped photos of this Montauk monster, sparking wild speculation. News reports said the creature looked otherworldly. Some claimed it was a secret lab animal from Plum Island, or even a leftover of a notorious Montauk Project experiments. More on that later. Experts eventually suggested it was probably a bloated raccoon carcass, but the mystery caught fire online. For days, people debated whether this was science, conspiracy, or a plain animal that nobody could recognize. It was Christmas 1980 in Suffolk, England, and US Air Force personnel at 2 bases saw something straight out of science fiction. Late on December 26th, witnesses reported strange lights flashing above Rendlesham Forest. Men with radar even tracked an object disappear behind the trees. A patrol sent in found a triangular craft with glowing lights and 3 landing legs. When soldiers approached, the craft vanished and some men lost consciousness for a few minutes during the encounter. The next night, the deputy base commander led a larger search party. They measured abnormally high radiation at the strange landing site, and multiple groups watched colored beams, a dome-shaped object, and figures moving inside it. To this day, the UFO landing remains one of the most credible military encounters on record. Even a US senator secretly investigated and hinted it was linked to other unexplained UFO events. Whether you believe in aliens or not, the Rendlesham Forest incident is a documented reality bend that has never been fully explained. Deep in a Norwegian valley, something glowing and inexplicable has been appearing since the 1980s. Residents of Hessdalen started seeing mysterious lights in the sky, glowing orbs hovering over the valley floor, darting through the woods, and even following vehicles. Hundreds of these lights were logged. At the peak, up to 20 per week would pop up above Hessdalen. Scientists got involved, of course. In 1983, they launched Project Hessdalen to record and study the phenomenon. phenomenon. In 1 month of field work, they documented 53 occurrences. The lights are typically white or yellow, sometimes pulsating or moving in odd ways. Even today, local cameras capture about 20 sightings a year. No one has nailed down a definitive cause, and theories range from unusual atmospheric plasma to car headlights on distant roads. Okay, this one is terrifyingly real. The US government did conduct mind control experiments on unwitting people. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA ran a secret program called MKUltra to explore chemical interrogation and behavior control. Under MKUltra, agents dosed hospital patients, prisoners, and even unsuspecting civilians with certain illicit substances. They tried hypnosis, electroshock, and sensory deprivation. Anything to manipulate the human mind. Most records of MKUltra were ordered destroyed, but enough evidence leaked out. We know that it happened. Government reviewers have confirmed MKUltra was active in the 1950s and that many original documents were purposely shredded by top CIA officials. The full extent of the experiments is still unknown, and in casual terms, the CIA really did try to make people hallucinate and break them mentally, a shocking glitch in reality where trusted institutions harmed real human beings.
Back in 1998, 2 independent teams of astronomers were studying distant exploding stars called supernova. What they found shocked them. Instead of slowing down over time, the universe was expanding faster and faster. To explain this, scientists invented the concept of dark energy, a mysterious force that makes up 70% of the cosmos. Here is the disturbing part. We have no idea what dark energy actually is. It could be an energy field spread throughout space, it could be a flaw in our equations, or most disturbingly, it might be something unstable that eventually flips. If that happens, it could trigger the Big Rip, a scenario where galaxies, stars, planets, and even atoms are torn apart. Physicist Robert Caldwell once described this outcome as the ultimate doomsday, where reality is shredded piece by piece. Right now, all we know for certain is that dark energy is real, it's getting stronger, and it means the universe is headed toward a future none of us can fully predict. In the quantum world, particles don't behave like they should. They can exist in multiple states at once, only deciding on one outcome when observed. This is called superposition, famously demonstrated in the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment. A cat inside a box could be both alive and dead until you look inside. In 2019, scientists managed to keep tiny objects in superposition long enough to study them, proving it isn't just theory. That means reality doesn't solidify until it's observed. If true, it suggests the universe might not even exist unless something is watching it, which is a terrifying idea. In 1991, scientists in Utah detected what they called the "oh my god" particle. It was a cosmic ray traveling so fast that it broke the known laws of physics. It carried the energy of a baseball pitched at full speed, all packed into a single subatomic particle. According to the Standard Model, this should be impossible, yet more ultra-high energy cosmic rays have been detected since, suggesting there are forces and particles out there we simply cannot explain. If the universe is producing things that violate its own rules, then reality itself might not be as consistent as we've been taught. Scientists predict that billions of years from now, the universe will not end with a bang, but with a whimper. This is called the heat death. Over time, stars burn out, galaxies drift apart, and all energy becomes evenly spread across space. When that happens, nothing new can ever form. No life, no stars, no reality as we know it. What makes it disturbing is that some physicists argue the early signs are already happening. Dark energy is pushing galaxies away at incredible speeds, and the universe might already be on its way to a cold, lifeless void. It's like reality itself has an expiration date. Finally, the most famous and unsettling theory of all, the simulation theory. In 2003, philosopher Nick Bostrom suggested that if future civilizations can simulate entire worlds, then it's more likely we are living inside one of those simulations than in base reality. Tech figures like Elon Musk have publicly agreed. Scientists have even tried to detect glitches in physical laws, like strange alignments in cosmic rays that could point to an artificial structure beneath reality. If true, then everything you see, touch, and feel could be nothing more than computer code running on a system we'll never understand. In 2021, scientists at Fermilab near Chicago measured a tiny particle called the muon. These subatomic particles spun in a way that completely broke the predictions of the standard model of physics, which is basically the instruction manual for how the universe is supposed to work. The muon wobbled too much, almost as if it was being tugged on by forces we didn't know existed. Physicists were stunned. Some said it could mean there are hidden dimensions or undiscovered forces. If true, then our entire understanding of matter is flawed. Imagine finding out the rulebook for the universe left out a few critical pages. It sounds like science fiction, but it's a real scientific proposal. What if the entire universe is actually a hologram? The idea first gained traction in 1997 when physicist Juan Maldacena linked two theories of physics that seemed totally different: string theory and quantum gravity. His work suggested that everything we see in 3 dimensions could actually be encoded on a flat, 2-dimensional surface. Imagine your entire life, every star in the sky, every planet and galaxy, not being 3-dimensional at all, but just a projection, like the images on a movie screen. Later, scientists studying black holes noticed something bizarre. The amount of information they can store seems to depend on their surface area, not their volume. This lined up perfectly with the holographic principle. In 2017, researchers analyzing cosmic microwave background radiation even reported signs of graininess, almost like the pixels of a screen, though the results remain debated. If the holographic theory turns out to be true, then what we think of as solid reality might be nothing more than data projected from a cosmic boundary that we can't even see. Here's a theory that will mess with your sense of reality. Time itself might not be real. Physicists like Carlo Rovelli argue that time is not a fundamental part of the universe, but rather something humans invented to keep track of change. In his book, The Order of Time, Rovelli describes how, at the deepest level of quantum mechanics, the equations don't even require time to function. The laws of physics work just fine without it. Evidence for this comes from experiments in quantum entanglement, where 2 particles can influence each other instantly, no matter how far apart they are. In 2018, researchers in China transmitted entangled photons across more than 1,200 kilometers, defying the idea of a ticking universal clock. If time is not fundamental, then past, present, and future may all exist at once, layered over each other like pages in a book. Your memory of yesterday and your anticipation of tomorrow might just be illusions created by your brain to navigate a timeless universe. Black holes are already the most terrifying objects in space, but the information paradox makes them even scarier. In the 1970s, Stephen Hawking discovered that black holes are not completely black. They actually leak energy over time, a process now called Hawking radiation. But this led to a horrifying conclusion. If a black hole eventually evaporates, what happens to the information about everything it swallowed? Physics says that information cannot be destroyed. If you burn a book, the ashes, the smoke, and heat still contain all the information needed to reconstruct what was written. But Hawking's work suggested black holes erase information permanently. This contradiction has haunted scientists for decades. Some believe the information gets smeared across the event horizon like a cosmic storage device. Others argue that it might re-emerge in scrambled form as Hawking radiation. The paradox is so fundamental that solving it could require an entirely new theory of physics, one that merges quantum mechanics with general relativity. Until then, black holes stand as cosmic glitches that threaten to break the rules of reality itself.
Reddit user Nakupendwa posted this image. My dad got me these when I was a youngish teenager from a trip they went on to Las Vegas. They write, I've only ever had this one set. It was spilled in the drawer, so I started putting them back in and ... And yeah, this is pretty strange. Obviously, stuff like this can easily be faked, but let's just say this Reddit user did happen to experience this. I'd be pretty unsettled. I mean, there are only 6 spaces in that container for 6 dice. Unless someone snuck an extra one in there as a prank, I don't have a solid explanation for this. Is this bus driving back from a Taylor Swift concert? Whoever was running the simulation when this image was taken just forgot to attend the diversity and inclusion seminar that morning. Or they just got lazy and decided to hit copy and paste and call it a day. Or I don't know, maybe they're all related. Or they could be one of those female friend groups that are all just blonde ladies, like with barely any discernible physical differences. Someone described them as maybe basic, drink a lot of Starbucks, their fiancés' names are Brad, they talk about Jesus a lot, you know the crowd. I've never actually hung out with people like this, but you know, am I reading too much into it? Probably. But am I probably right? Probably. So this is nuts. Are they doppelgangers? I mean, not only do they look very similar in size, shape, and face, but their clothes match, they have the same backpacks, their drinks are the same, for God's sakes. It seems too uncanny to be a coincidence. So there's a good chance they're also twins. If that's the case, then this is just hilarious. You don't really see adult twins dressing the exact same clothes, buying the same knapsacks and beverages, unless it's a cartoon, or possibly, in this case, a simulation. Back in October, people near Grissom Joint Air Reserve Base in Indiana got a front row seat to something strange in the sky. Multiple glowing orange orbs, at least 6, were seen darting around, hovering, flickering, and then just disappearing. Witnesses were pretty freaked out. It wasn't just what people saw with their eyes either. One observer checked their Doppler radar and noticed a massive rectangular shape with a vapor shock wave trailing behind it. That's basically a trail that happens when something moves insanely fast through the air. The shape was estimated to be about 20 miles long. Naturally, skeptics chimed in. Alejandro Rojas from Enigma Labs said it might just be military flares, pointing to the way the lights lit up and faded in a row, but that doesn't explain everything, especially since this wasn't an isolated incident. Similar UFO sightings popped up near other military bases, like in Virginia just months earlier. What you're looking at here are burns on a woman's hands, and this is a newspaper clipping of the same woman's hair starting to fall out in clumps. These unsettling images are photographic evidence of the Cash Landrum incident. On the night of December 29, 1980, 3 people in Texas had a disturbing encounter with a UFO. Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and Vicki's grandson Colby were driving home when they noticed this massive diamond-shaped object hovering over the trees. It was throwing off flames, extreme heat. At first, Vicki thought that this was a religious sign, something like the Second Coming. She told Betty to stop the car, but once they got out, the heat was just unbearable. The thing was so hot that when Betty touched the car, her hand burned and Vicky's handprint got seared into the dashboard. As the object suddenly started climbing back into the sky, a swarm of military helicopters appeared and surrounded it. But the aftermath is what really pushes this story into the disturbing territory. That night, all 3 of them started to feel sick. Betty ended up with blisters, her hair started falling out, and later she was diagnosed with cancer. Vicky developed a cataract. Their symptoms seemed to line up eerily well with radiation exposure. They eventually sued the US government for $20 million, pointing to those helicopters as proof that the military knew more than they were letting on, but the case was dismissed. To this day, no one can fully explain what they ran into on that empty Texas road. This is one of the most famous images ever taken of a mysterious phenomenon over the skies of Norway. In the Hasdalen Valley of Norway, people keep reporting these strange glowing lights that just can't be explained. They'll show up in the middle of the night or sometimes during the day, sometimes floating for over an hour, other times flashing across the sky in just seconds. They don't always look the same either. Sometimes they're white, sometimes red or yellow, and they'll drift slowly or dart around. Scientists have tried to explain them as some kind of natural plasma caused by the metals in the hills reacting with the environment, but that doesn't match every sighting. The movements are just too strange. That's why Hasdalen is still considered one of the most active UFO hotspots in the world.